Mine's probably fairly slow too, so I'm sure we can all kind of bear with each other on that one.
Cool.
All right, so is everybody ready for the quiz?
Yeah, we're ready.
I think we're waiting on one more person. Let me see if I can figure out who it is. Okay, so probably what I'm going to do with this quiz is going to email everyone the quiz, and then I'll have you download the quiz, take it, and then save it, and email me back a copy of it after you're done. Can everybody do that?
Yeah, sounds easy enough. Is it going to be a PDF or Word document? What are we looking at?
It's in a Word doc, and if that doesn't work, let me know, and I can. There we go. Okay, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna email everyone a copy of this. We just got the last person in, so I'm gonna repeat what I just said. I'm gonna email everyone a copy of this quiz, and I'm gonna have you download it, take it, save it, and send it back to me. Looks like it's just in a Word document, so it shouldn't be too hard to do. But let me know, and if you do have any trouble with it, I can try and just copy and paste it into an email, and we can do it like that, or um, we'll figure something out. But does anyone think they may have a problem with that? I'll take silence as a no. All right. Let me make sure. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and send you all this now. Did anyone not get it yet?
I haven't got it yet.
Okay. Well, we'll just wait a few minutes. Um,
I just got it.
okay, cool. Basically, guys, don't use your notes. We're trying to figure out what you know, maybe what areas we need to go back and talk about. Um, if everyone gets the same question wrong, then we clearly know that we didn't do things well. So just complete it to the best of your ability, and we'll go over it after you guys all send it back to me. But what we're going to do is I'll probably give you guys about 45 minutes. And in that 45 minutes, just going to go ahead and take it and then send it back to me. And as we all get done, you can do whatever you need to do. Um, and then we will meet back up at 6:25-ish. And we'll go over it, and then we'll start class for the day.
Sounds good.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
Or yeah, 6:25 works. As long as everybody's got it now. Does anyone not have it? Okay.
Actually, sorry, I'm having some real computer issues. This is Brian. Not sure if I have it or not yet. I'm having some computer difficulties myself tonight.
Okay. Is it not showing up, or is it not pulling up?
Well, I think it's more just a laptop issue because I've actually got it on my phone. I just can't answer it on my phone.
Okay. Let me see if maybe I can. I'll just try and copy it.
All right, I've got it. Sorry.
Oh, you got
False
it now?
alarm.
Okay.
Yeah, just took forever to show up. So it may take forever to send back to. So
That's all right. We'll figure it all out. All right. Well, I will see everyone back at 6:25 then.
I can't get Word pulled up.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Davis, if you just copy and paste the quiz as a Google Doc and then send him a Google Doc, he could just fill it out.
Yeah, that's I'm gonna try and do that here real quick.
That's what I did because I don't have Word on my computer.
Yeah, I can do it that way.
Oh, let me see what here. Can you guys not open it as a Google Doc?
No, I got it working with the Google Doc.
Okay, because I was actually just able to open it as a Google Doc. So is there anyone that wasn't able to do that? Okay, so everyone has access to the quiz.
Yes.
Okay. If you guys have any issues or anything, I'll still have my headphones on and I'll be here for questions and stuff. Not to answer the questions for you, but if you have any issues getting the stuff back to me or something. All right, all you guys see is this blue aircraft dispatch thing, right? Just like a cover page.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna start
Yes.
pulling up quizzes just to go over them. All right, what is the definition of operational control?
In respect to a flight, the power of authority of initiating, conducting, or terminating a flight.
That is correct. All right. What age must you be to obtain your aircraft dispatcher certificate?
23.
23. How many hours of instruction are required to obtain your aircraft dispatcher certificate?
200.
200. What's the maximum speed an aircraft can fly below 10,000 feet?
250 knots.
Indicated.
250 knots. Your indicated can actually be faster than that. This will be like your cruise speed. So the indicated can actually be thrown off Your indicator is basically a measure of how much air is going through the pitot tube. So if you're going into a really heavy headwind or something, there could be a whole lot more going through, and it'll indicate way faster.
So is your ground speed not your indicated speed?
Yeah.
Okay. That
So
confuses me.
would 250 knots indicated airspeed be an incorrect answer?
Yes. All right. According to the FARs, when does a flight require an alternate to be listed on the dispatch release?
When VFR is not allowed. When minimum's not allowed for IFR flight.
That was the one where always, unless we have 1 hour before and 1 hour after the ETA, we have 2,000 foot ceiling and 3-mile visibility.
Yes. Yeah. So always, unless an hour before and an hour after your ETA, you got a ceiling of 2,000 feet and a visibility of 3 miles. Does anybody want to say what the 5 things were that go on a airline's op specs?
The name of the airline, the address of the company, reference to economic authority, serial numbers of all the planes that they have, regular airports.
Nice. All right. According to the FARs, how long can a dispatcher be scheduled for duty in a 24-hour period?
10 hours per day with 8-hour break between days.
That's correct. Correct. You can work longer than 10 hours. You just can't be scheduled for more than 10 hours. All right. According to the FARs, what 3 things are the dispatcher solely responsible for?
Monitoring the progress of the flight, the canceling or redispatching a flight, and then information to the pilot
Yeah.
regarding
Monitor the progress of
flight.
each flight, information to the pilot, and cancel or redispatch. Name some things that constitute a suitable airport. There's a whole lot of things that can be said here.
The 60% landing.
Yeah. Weather minimums, fuel, staffing.
Personnel. Yeah.
Yeah, a whole lot of stuff can be said there. Okay, when is a takeoff alternate required?
And the weather minimums at the departing airport aren't good.
Yes, when it's illegal to land at that airport, when the weather is below legal landing minimums. Just in case you did have to come back to it, you'd need to be able to land.
Hey, Davis.
Yeah.
I think you forgot number 8.
Aha. Okay. According to the FARs, what 3 things is the dispatcher and PIC jointly responsible for? This is a big one too. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Pre-flight planning, delay, and dispatch release.
Yep. So that's the PDD. This one is a personal favorite of a lot of people in the office because pilots will call and complain, and it'll be after their flight's over, and they'll call and, you didn't give me enough fuel for this. It's like, well, if you'd have called before the flight, left, we're both responsible for what goes on here and the planning. We could have gotten you more fuel. That's always kind of a funny one.
Bet you don't say that though.
Depends on
In
who's
different
talking.
words.
Yeah, sometimes people will fire right back at them. A lot of times people fire right back at them. It just kind of, but they do it a little more tactfully than you telling them they should have called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's wind and other weather, anticipated traffic delays, one instrument approach and one alternate approach, and any other conditions that might cause landing delay.
Good. The one instrument approach and then a possible missed approach, not an alternate approach. So wind and other weather, one instrument approach and a possible missed approach, any anticipated traffic delays, and then any other conditions that might delay the flight, which is their little catch-all there. Okay, according to the FARs, what are the fuel requirements for a flight under domestic operations?
To be able to fly to your destination and then your furthest alternate, and then for another 45 minutes at normal cruising speed.
Nice. Name the 5 required items that must be on the dispatch release.
So it's all the airports so the destination, departure, intermediate, and alternate.
Yep. So all of
The
our
type-
airports.
Yep, the type of flight, whether VFR or IFR.
Yep.
The minimum fuel,
Yep.
the ID of the airplane, and
Yep.
the trip number.
You got it.
Weather reports. I didn't hear that one.
The weather will be attached to it.
Okay.
That's the wording there, is that the weather is attached to that. So it's technically not counted as one of the 5 things, but yes, absolutely the weather is supposed to be attached to it.
Okay.
If the PSC has less than 100 hours, it's a Hyman's captain. In that type of aircraft, what do we have to add to his weather minimums?
$100 feet and a half a mile, right?
Bingo. What 3 things must the pilot carry with him on the airplane to its destination?
The load manifest, the dispatch release, and the flight release.
The flight plan. Yep.
Flight plan, yeah.
True or false? A dispatcher must delegate his authority to sign the release, but not his authority to dispatch.
False.
Yeah. True or false? A dispatcher should never declare an emergency.
False.
False. And true or false? Dispatcher must log 8 hours per year observing operations from the cockpit jump seat.
False. It's 5 hours.
5 hours. All right. I looked at a lot of people's. Looks like most everybody did a pretty good job on that. I don't think I saw any ones where I was really not pleased. So I think you guys all did pretty good. All right. Well, let's go ahead and start off today. Let me get to the slideshow here. right, so we'll be talking about some navigation today, some flight instruments, and kind of some of the things we're going to do as far as approaches. Yeah, so navigational systems. We're going to be talking a lot about GPS, these flight controls, approaches. So our traditional navigation systems are going to be more ground-based, like kind of how Garrett and I were talking the other day. It's going to be based upon your VORs. We haven't really, the U.S. hasn't really forced everyone to go to mostly GPS yet. They're well on their way though. So the first one's going to be a non-directional beacon, or just we call this an NDB. And basically what it is it's going to be a ground-based radio transmitter, and it transmits in all directions. It's going to be, it's not a lot of people use them anymore. They still used for points and things like that, and they use them in missed approaches for ILSs. But to use one, the best way to use one is to use it with an ADF, which is an automatic direction finder. Basically what this does is it can help you use those radio transmissions to kind of figure out where the NDB is. And then you can use that to figure out, where you are, where you need to go. My computer's running really slow today. So basically, what we've got here is we're going to have our little plane, this little orange guy, and then the arrow is going to be pointing to or away from where it's at. I've never flown before. I've been in planes, many planes, but a lot of you guys with flight experience probably know how to use these things better than I do, as well as most of the instruments we'll talk about today. So if you guys have anything to say, then speak up, and of course we're happy to hear that. But I don't think I've actually ever talked to anybody who knew how to do an NDB approach, or maybe not that didn't know how to, but that had done it in practice. So this is a radiomagnetic indicator. They're found on really high performance aircraft, and basically what this is going to be able to tell you is where VORs and where ADFs are. So kind of similar, plane's going to be in the center, and then it's going to be pointing to where those other things are. This is kind of what I was saying earlier. So the arrow here, the head of it, the pointy part, is going to be your head, and that's going to be basically pointing to that NDB. And then this would be the from section back here. Okay, so we talked a lot about VORs the other day. So it's going to be very high frequency omnidirectional range. These are really big for us, especially with this CRJ 700, because we're going to be doing a lot of VOR navigation, just like we were talking about the other day when we were in Sky Vector. So when we're using those jet routes, those are all based off of VORs. So you remember when on these jet routes, so we're going from a vortac there, you go up this jet route, this is going to be another one, and they each go from these to and from these VORs, and it's going to be based on this ground base. We use these all the time. They're also in a lot of missed approaches for ILSs. So what we've got here, 360 degrees. Yeah, so the primary navigation aid used by civil aviation, ground oriented. It transmits this azimuth to aircraft. It's all high frequency radio. And the air information is not influenced at all by the aircraft's attitude or heading. So these are coming from the ground, and then it's going to be communicating up to the airplane in the air. You'll see these identification the Morse code. So every 15 seconds it'll actually, you can hear it going off. And then let's see if we can find one here. If you guys read Morse code, it's going to be a really handy thing for almost nothing except knowing what these are going to sound like. So right here, we've got this for the VOR here. We've got the frequency for it. We've got the name for it, where it's at, the Lagrange. This is going to be the Morse code, which is almost pointless because, I guess if you heard it, you might be able to follow along with this. But that's what that is, those little lines and dots. And when you're flying along, you can actually tune into them, listen to them to hear that they are in service and working. I actually have heard that, and it was kind of cool because I'd always just heard that, and I always just kind of figured that Morse code was so old that nothing ever used it anymore. But we were heading into Meridian, Mississippi, which was a little it's a very small airport in Mississippi. But my favorite thing from that day is that the FBO in Meridian, Mississippi has free ice cream. So just in case you guys are ever flying through there.
Now, what's FBO?
It's just like trying to think of what it stands for now. One of you guys help me out. What does that stand for?
Fixed based operator. It's basically a service station for aircraft and pilots.
Yeah, there's a lot of times there's little pilot rooms, and they can go in there and check weather on computers, things like that. You can buy fuel from the FBO. Most of the time, they're the ones in charge of hangars and taking rent from tenants and things like that around the airport. Every now and then at SkyWest, we'll divert a plane into a really small place and that we may not have operations at, and we'll call up the FBO and have them go out there, fuel the plane up, and then we take off again. But it's general aviation uses them a lot. So we were talking about our VORs the other day. So just your typical VOR is going to look like this. VOR DME, that's going to have your distance measuring equipment on it, so you're going to be able to tell how far away you are. The VORTAC is going to be a VOR and a TACAN. The TACAN is what we can get our DME off of, and also the military can use it for other things, but we can use it for DME. So as far as we're concerned, this up here, the VorTac and the VOR DME are very similar for us. So looking at these symbols, you guys want to say what our Cedar City and what our Bryce is?
KCDC, or sorry, Cedar City is just a VOR DME. Someone else want to do Bright?
It's just a VOR.
It's a vortex, isn't it?
Attack, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a VorTac. So our VOR DME is going to have the box around it because it's extra. The VOR is just going to be this. And the VorTac, think about these as like, I always just thought of them as like shields because the military uses them and it's extra, so it's more than a VOR. So when you're looking at the map, I mean, I know that's a really silly thing, but that's how I always remembered them. But this is a lot of how we actually still get around, is using these jet routes. Well, there's a couple, actually these are Victor routes. But yeah, the jet routes, the Victor routes, and they're all based on these VORs and ground-based. All right, so we've got DME. I know we kind of touched on this with the VOR DME. Basically, what DME is distance measuring equipment. You can tell how far away you are from something. That's, I mean, clearly can be very useful when you're in a plane. Things that have DME, we're going to have VOR DMEs, VorTacs, an ILS typically has DME, and most of the time it comes off of the localizer. So clearly a localizer is going to also have DME. So when we tune into these DMEs, it basically can tell us how far away we are from something. And so if we were in a plane and we were coming up to something, we could actually turn based off of our DME. I can't read that number, but it looks like maybe like 224, 22 point something. We'll just say 22. So if we knew we had to get to a point over here that was 22 nautical miles away from Ormond Beach, but we're coming in and we've got this point over here, and we also know that it's 22, we can hit this and then stay 22 miles away from that VOR, and it can come back around and bring us in on this localizer. And then we know that once we get to a certain point here, we're going to be able to pick up the localizer, and it's going to provide that side-to-side navigation for us, that lateral navigation. And we can use this to put us on this point right here would be called the initial approach fix, this IAP. And we can do that, yeah, so we don't have to go directly to the VOR or anything. We can use that, that arc to get back around to it. Okay, so does anybody remember what our VOR volumes are for a low VOR and a high VOR?
like 130 miles or something.
Yeah, so the high is going to be 130 miles. The low is going to be 40. And then terminal is going to be 25. So think of these things. So when we're looking up here at our high VOR, the high VOR is meant to be above 18,000 feet and below 45,000 feet. We don't really have much that goes above this. So that's where it's meant to be the best. That's what this product is made for, is to be between those altitudes. So clearly that's where it's going to work the best. When you get above that, it's not going to work as well. The service volume goes down. When you get below that, the service volume doesn't work as well, or you can't pick it up as well, and it goes down. Clearly, down here, it gets pretty small because there could be different terrain, all sorts of stuff, and they're trying to project everything up. Same with the low, but with the low, once we get to a certain point, we just get nothing. And that's from or up to 18,000 feet. These terminals only go up to 12,000. Does everybody get that? It's kind of cake-shaped. Doesn't work as well where it's not supposed to.
Yeah.
Cool, cool.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sure helps a lot.
Huh? So with the VOR, I mean, when we start thinking about, we've got this radio signal coming off, we start thinking about the components that we're going to have. With a radio, you're going to have a receiver, you're going to have antenna, and we're going to have to be able to find it. So just kind of like what we were talking about earlier, you got this needle, it's going to it, from it. These are going to be telling you how many degrees you are within it. And this is where you can tune it to. And then you can actually have another one on standby. So you can tune into whichever one you wanted to. So sometimes, I mean, if you're trying to tune into one, there might be 4 or 5 of them within 130 miles. Well, maybe not that many, but there could be multiples. So you got to know which one you're tuning into.
The Morse code comes into play. That's how you identify you're on the right one.
Yeah. So now that you speak that, you can figure it out way easier. But your codes are always going to be on there. So to find this Lagrange, we'd tune into 115.6. Okay, so our HSI, our horizontal situation indicator, this probably means a lot to you guys that fly. I'm not super familiar with one. I've never flown, so but there's a lot of actually good information on this and a lot of different ways that you can use it to find VORs, to do approaches, and actually in our class plane here, the CRJ 700, if we lost all of our other instruments, this is how they would use this to fly. Now, if they did use this, they would probably end up just landing at the nearest airport they could. But you can use this to fly. So kind of what we're looking at here is, I pulled up another picture of this. And this kind of shows you more of what we're dealing with here. So this is going to be our deviation. This is going to be where we're going to, clearly, where we're going from. We can also use this on the side to figure out where our glide slope is. That's going to mean more to you later when we start explaining about instrument approaches. And then this our little airplane in here is kind of telling you how you're flying. Do you guys that fly have any good tips on anything of how this is used?
I've never used one before. I've seen a few, but I haven't used one before.
Oh, really? I've always been told this is much more of like a general aviation thing. But
well, I don't fly in big
It's a lot
airplanes,
more. It's like a 2-in-1. It does your VORs, and then it corrects for heading. I can't remember how it quite works, but they're starting to be more on like advanced aircraft, like you were saying, like. And then, but most people just use that standard VOR radio frequency navigation.
Yeah, so these lateral deviation bar and the lateral deviation scale are kind of how it shows you how to correct it. And then the glide slope pointer, when you're coming in for approaches, if it's up, then you actually are it's the exact opposite of what you would think. So if it's up, you are too low, I think. It probably says in here. I should know this, guys. But kind of just what it's telling you is that it's this is how you can, like he was saying, correct for deviations and stuff. They're in all of our planes. So this is the glide slope thing over here. This is your navigation heading, how the plane's flying. Anyway. Sorry guys, my computer's going slow tonight. This is similar, but this is on a glass interface. So whenever you hear people talk about glass cockpits, they're talking about big animated screens like this. So there are actually, you can check on VORs and things like that. We'll kind of move on though. We kind of need to get to scooting along. So RNAV is area navigation. This is a big one for us. This is going to allow for basically more direct routing. We're going to be using a lot of GPS for this. Allows a pilot to fly a selected course to a predetermined point without the need to overfly ground-based navigation facilities. So kind of think of this as like just being able to fly wherever you want, like point to point, while using like a GPS in the air. And that GPS can basically just like track your position and all sorts of stuff. And that's not going to be solely based off of ground-based systems. It's not going to be off VORs. You may not have to use, like this is showing here. This is just a waypoint. So a lot of times you would have to go to a VOR and then from the VOR to go find the waypoint. This waypoint is going to be stored in something, and so you can just go straight to it. So the way we find all those for area navigation is through these system of satellites in outer space. GPS. Are you guys familiar with the whole GPS satellites? We're receiving signals from outer space telling us where we are. Assume we're good on that.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it like uses 3 points, like your point and then 2 satellites to.
Yeah,
Show
we'll
your
actually
point.
talk about using and how many we're going to be able to use. And then we actually have more advanced use of these satellites in RAIM and WAS coming up. We'll talk about those. But anyway, we're using all of these to determine where we are. And yeah, so we're using these to triangulate, like you were saying, we use a whole bunch of them, or 2 or 3 to figure out where we are. So yeah, like you were saying, tracks multiple satellites, determines the aircraft position. They're not affected by weather, so it's not like a radio frequency that could get staticky or get blocked by like a big storm, something like that.
The electronics in the cockpit alter that at all? Like it would like a compass?
No.
All right.
And you'll actually see these can get really specific. We can know within feet of where we're at using certain satellites. And we're also using, if we can ever get to it, this next slide. Here we go. We're also using ground tracking to figure out, so we'll have points on the ground that will have the GPS configured to kind of see, okay, so we know exactly where this point is at. What are the satellites telling us? Where do the satellites think it is? And where is it actually? And how can we correct it based off of that? So this would be your GPS receiver. This might be an airplane. So the airplane is receiving this as well as these ground receivers. And then the ground receivers are trying to see, okay, how far off is this satellite? Where does it think we are? And then how can we correct that? So this is all constantly being done. Do you guys understand that? Does anyone not? Okay. So we're going to be using a minimum of 4 satellites, and that'll give us a 3D positioning over where we are. That's going to be, we can use all those to look at the ground receivers back to us. It's going to be telling us pretty precisely where we're at. And then when we are up in IFR, we're going to have this RAIM. And the RAIM is a receiver autonomous integrity monitoring. So this is constantly monitoring everything. GPS receiver verifies usability, the integrity of the GPS, constellation signals through RAIM, determines if a satellite is providing corrupt information. Without RAIM capability, no assurance of accuracy of GPS position. So this is kind of what's keeping us in check here. And for this, we'll need 4 plus 1. So we actually need 5 satellites for this. So we do actually have RAIM outages. to where we see actually these NOTAMs all the time. A NOTAM is basically says if anything is out of service with anything in the airspace or at an airport. They tell us what's broken, what's working all the time. So these RAM outages, we check these, and this basically tells us if our GPSs are going to be obscured in any way. So if they are obscure, then clearly you're not going to be flying exactly where you think you are. Sometimes the military can dump this. The best explanation I've got it is like magic glitter, and they can dump this stuff around their bases when they're doing testing and a lot of flying, and it completely blocks all of our frame. So you basically have to plan around ground base when they do that. And they do this all the time in Salt Lake and Las Vegas when they start having a lot of military drills. And so then we have to plan based off of all the jet routes and VORs and things like that, because we've basically lost our GPS integrity then. So this GPS meets standards and technical standards orders. This is basically just saying we have to have our IFR certification as required to be able to use GPS. So we can use GPS en route, and we can also use GPS at the airport. So there are GPS arrivals, GPS approaches, and they can tell us how to get into and out of airports and things like that. For this class, we've got to have an alternate means of navigation appropriate for the route of flight to destination and alternate. So there's got to be ground-based nav aids. They have to be operational. We also have to have a ground-based approach at our alternate airport. So we can't just rely on GPS here, because then if anything ever did go wrong, we might end up flying blind. So we've got to be able to have backup systems. Okay, WAS and LAS. Wide or local area augmentation system. Mostly what we're going to be talking about is WAS, and this is an upgraded version of the GPS. We actually can improve our, I think I've seen it as anywhere from 3 meters to 10 feet. We know exactly where we're at as long as we have WAS. So receivers use 2 geostationary WAS satellites. Performance enable instrument approach procedures with GPS and WAS glide paths. GPS precision approaches with vertical guidance. So these can actually, it's so specific and has such good integrity and accuracy that we can use these for vertical guidance as well. So that's what the LNAV VNAV is. This would be lateral guidance, and then VNAV would be vertical guidance. And this is going to be kind of similar there. We've got these wide area reference stations. So our integrity of these is going to be actually really good. I found a video earlier. This is something the FAA put out. and it kind of explains a little more about it. Can you guys hear this at all?
No.
No.
I can't.
Not at all.
What's done is he just puts the what is that? The website in the chat box, and we just watch it.
Oh. All right, did you guys all get through that?
I still couldn't hear it, but
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I'll see if I can email the link out later. It's really not that super important. It just kind of gives you a little bit more of a 3D view of how it all works. Or I can put it in. I can put it on the website later. Well, sorry that didn't work, guys. So this inertial navigation system is just a computer-based navigation system. Tracks the movement of the aircraft. Let's see if we can get through this real quick. So there's all sorts of sensors on the aircraft that the aircraft is going to use through computers to be able to tell, what it's doing, where it's going, what the altitude is, the indicated airspeed, true airspeed, air temp. So it's going to be able to measure all those. If you're in RVSM airspace, there's 2 of these required, and that's just to be able to tell more about what your altitude and speed is, as opposed to in everyone else, because that's going to be reduced vertical separation minima. So all the aircraft are going to be a lot closer to each other. So we're going to have to be more precise. So if one goes out or something, then you'd want to back up there. This is also a lot of instruments on telling the plane how it's flying, telling the pilots what it's doing, by combining several instruments into one display. This is kind of like that HSI we were talking about earlier there. Kind of showing how the plane's flying. All right, integrated flight control system integrates various systems into one system operated and controlled by one component, comprised of airframe, FDS, and autopilot. It's the if you're going to go into RVSM, you have to have autopilot operational, and it's basically just going to control everything. It's pretty unbelievable what autopilot can do. In some planes, it can even land the plane for you as an auto land. Not any of SkyWest's, but a lot of mainline carriers have them. All right, so the FMS, this is kind of, we talked a little bit about this the other day. This is one of those things that's going to have all of those waypoints, everything programmed into it. It is the big computer system of the aircraft. So it's a master computer interface with all navigation sensors. Whew. It's got your GPS in it. The control display unit. So what it is got this display here, and then everything of what you do with it is basically down below. This is how you're going to be typing your ACARs. This is how you're going to get your numbers for takeoff. It all is a big electronic database, and it's going to have everything memorized in here of where things are, and yeah, with the instrument departures, instrument arrivals, and instrument approach procedures. You can just input everything into this, and it knows exactly where you're going and what you're doing. All right, so because it has all those points in it, it's going to be able to tell you how much fuel you're going to be burning. So all the time, this looks at what your fuel is, how much you have left, how much it's going to take to get to where you're going. It's going to be telling you how much fuel you're landing with, and kind of what your speed is and how to manage that fuel as well. Yeah, display system, graphical weather display, air-to-ground data link communication. So this is going to be able to, they're going to be able to communicate back to you. It's kind of just a little typed responses. They can type up whatever they want to say. So when you're looking at this, these components up here, if you can kind of see, this is the, it'll kind of tell you down here the PFD, ICAS, the MFD, CDU. But this one over here is kind of showing you, this is the PFD, it's kind of showing you how the plane's flying. Next to it, we have a lot of our navigational displays. This a lot of times also has weather radars on it and stuff too. In the middle, we have the MFD here. What that's going to be telling you is all sorts of things. You can flip to a lot of different screens. It'll tell you how the hydraulics are doing, the electrical systems, basically just how the plane is functioning. and down here you're going to have your the CDUs. Basically, this is like where your FMS is, and this is where you'll be doing your ACARSing, and that's where all that's entered into, where you do your navigational like routes and things like that. All right, instrument approach procedures. That's going to take a lot of time. I think we will take a break here, quick 10 minutes. Let's see, we go 5:30 to 9:30, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's take a quick 10 minutes and we'll come back at 7:40. Okay, so as far as we're talking about nav aids, you need to know what we've got. What are we using for ground-based? What can we go to? Let me see if I can get back up here in less than a year. So like what, we've got these Vortax, we've got VORs, we've got VOR DME. We need to know kind of how we can use those, why we're using those, and basically kind of what they set up, that web of J routes and Victor routes. These NDBs and the automatic directional finder. So we've got
Davis.
Yeah.
Mine's blank. It just says has the blue airplane in the globe.
Whoops.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, so we've got an NDB and we have an automatic direction finder. Basically what we're going to do is we've got to be able to use this tool and this thing transmitting off of the ground to be able to know where we're going, know what the plane's doing. That's what that one is doing. So we've got a tool on the plane that talks to this transmitter on the ground, and it tells us where we're going, what we're doing. Our VORs, like I was saying, know kind of what they make up, know why we use them, know why we need ground-based, know how they work. You need to know the service volumes, so 130 and 40. That's big. And then kind of know a general understanding of, you need to know why we use GPSs, how this works with the satellites in the air, with receivers on the ground. That we have RAIM, and that RAIM is basically just a higher integrity. If there's a RAIM outage, clearly you can kind of figure out what that means. It means basically we just don't have RAIM. It's going to give us, poor satellite geometry leads to large position errors, change in aircraft dynamics, such as banking obscures the GPS satellite signal. Did you guys have any questions over any of those? WAS uses geostationary satellites. We can use it for LNAV and VNAV, so lateral and vertical guidance. An FMS is a big one. This is basically, I mean, it's just a computer and it stores everything. It's a huge database of all of our nav aids, airways, SIDs, stars, approaches. It's got everything in there. If you, like at SkyWest, our pilots can pull this up and look at it and say, okay, we're going St. George to Salt Lake and we're taking off of runway 11, and then they'll put in all the points from St. George to Salt Lake, and then they can put in that they're going to do a certain arrival and they're going to land on runway 16 right. And that computer knows everything. It knows the whole burns, everything. So the pilots are up here. They're using these systems and everything to not only monitor the plane, but they're going to be looking at how the plane's flying with these PFDs, the primary flight displays. All right, so before I go on, questions? All right, cool. So an ILS, Category 1, an ILS is an approach into an airport. This is basically, it's going to give us lateral guidance as well as vertical guidance. This is typically our best landing minimums wherever we go. And so this is kind of what we're going to be using for most of our flight planning purposes, and then the pilots are going to be using them for most of their landing purposes, really. Our guys at SkyWest pretty much always shoot the ILSs. So a Category 1, these are all going to be instrument approaches. And it's usually going to be able to go down to 1/2 mile of visibility and a 200-foot ceiling. And that 1/2 mile of visibility is 2,400 RVR. That's the runway visual range. You guys remember what that is? That's it's basically like just two beams of light on going down the runways, and they shoot this light at each other, and they're able to measure what the visibility is in a much more specific manner than just 1/2 mile. So for a Category 2 approach, this gets cut in half. So now we can go to an RVR, runway visual range, of 1,200, and we can go down to a decision height of 100. So that's the ceiling we need, is 100. We need a 100-foot ceiling, and we need 1,200 RVR. You also have to be certified for a Cat 2 landing. Like I know at SkyWest, our high minimums captains are not allowed to do Category 2 landings. Category 3 is there's a huge can of worms when you open Category 3 because there's not only special certification, but there's a lot of instruments you have to have in the plane to be able to do these. And Cat 3A, you can go down to 700 RVR. Cat 3B, 150, and 0 for a C with no ceiling. It's kind of astonishing. Okay, so with this ILS, it's very precise. So vertical guidance as well as lateral guidance here. So when we're coming in and we're flying our plane, we'll be flying in like this, and then all of a sudden we'll hit this lateral guidance coming up, and then we start down with the vertical guidance. And basically it kind of just guides us right down in. And so we follow our lateral and vertical guidance. It's very precise. Our lateral guidance is going to be coming off the localizer, and our vertical is going to be coming off the glide slope. So we're also going to have a lot of other parts of that too. You can kind of see those over here on the right. So we're going to have approach lighting system that's going to be guiding us in. Runway center line, touchdown zone lighting. If you ever look out your window when you're coming in places, you'll keep seeing these boxes. And you'll see these. This is basically just all part of your ILS. And remember, you can pull your DME off the localizer here. This next picture gives us a little bit more in detail. So as you're coming in too, you're also going to be hitting these markers that are going to be kind of telling you where you are along those. The first one you're going to hit is clearly the outer marker. And there's a middle marker as well. And actually when you come over these, so like right here what it's saying, the outer marker located 4 to 7 miles from the end of the runway, the plane will actually make a sound as it goes over it, and I'm not even going to try and mimic it, but it kind of lets them know how close they are and that they are coming in on that. But it makes like a little like beeping sound as they go over it, and then it's slightly different when they hit the middle marker. This over here is basically just talking about how many degrees wide it can be. Oops. and then how many degrees thick it's going to be. And these are basically all going to be running off of radio transmission signals. So you'll be tuned in to the frequency of whatever the localizer. So you have your localizer out here, and it basically shoots this big wide area, and then that's kind of what guides you in. And that's going to be your lateral guidance. So the localizer is going to be side to side. And the glide slope is going to be your vertical guidance. So glide slope up and down. So just like when you're flying in, you come in, you hit the glide slope, and you start going down. The glide slope is normally usable up to 10 nautical miles from the transmitter. However, some locations may be certified for greater ranges. So these marker beacons, the outer marker, middle marker, inner marker, locator outer marker, locator middle marker. Those are basically just going to be telling you that you are on course. So if you're ever flying by an airport at night, you can a lot of times see these lights. If you wake up super early in the morning sometimes, there will be a lot of people doing night flying in St. George, and because the airport's like up on the hill, it's like all you can see. Sometimes on my way to work, I can see these at like 3 or 4 in the morning, and it just looks like pitch black outside, and then all of a sudden you see these like sequenced flashing lights, and they just flash on in. But so this is an ALSIF 2, an ALSIF 1. Basically what those are is approach light system with sequence flashing lights. And then the Salzer and Mauser. Mauser you'd see more than Salzer. That's a medium intensity approach light system with runway alignment indicator lights. This rail lights is basically just right at the end, runway end identification lights. And then the MALSIF medium intensity approach light system with sequence flashing lights and runway alignment. Basically just kind of know that we use a lot of lighting systems to be able to guide airplanes in and let them know where they're going and what direction. A lot of these are sequenced, so they're going to be flashing in as they're going down. So over here is going to be a visual glide slope indicator. So you'll see there's typically 4 of them. A lot of times you'll notice that they're just 4 lined up all side by side. And if you're on the glide path, glide slope, it'll have 2 lit up and then 2 white, 2 red, 2 white. If you're above it, you're all white. If you're below it, you're all red. So that just kind of gives them, when they're not, when they come in and it's real good visual conditions, a lot of times pilots just use those to know if they're on the glide slope or not. And it's pretty cool too. Sometimes you can actually see them correct. So they'll come in and they'll be on all white, and then they'll start dropping a little harder. And it's kind of weird because as they drop, you can see the lights kind of changing to be too red, too white. I don't think I've ever come in and seen all four red whenever I've done my jump seating. So there's multiple types of localizer approaches. The LDA is actually what we have in St. George. So the localizer directional aid is not aligned with the runway. It's actually off to the side. We still get pretty good approach minimums off it though. Not as good as an ILS, but similar. So that's going to be 3 to 6 degrees. This simplified directional facility aligned within 3 degrees of the runway. And that's going to have a width of 6 to 12. And then we have the localizer, and that's our best minimums. If we're looking at localizer approaches, and a localizer can either be an approach on its own or it can be part of an ILS. So there are only localizer approaches or localizer only approaches where it only gives you lateral guidance. And then the localizer back course is actually, we're just coming in using the back of the localizer. So we're tuned into it and it's just emitting, we're seeing what it's emitting out of the back. And those are not as good of minimums. So an MLS, a microwave landing system, these are not super popular, but it is a ground-based navigational aid. It's similar to a ILS, but this one actually is a curved path coming in. Okay, so RNP, what we were talking about the other day, RNP is actually great. Stands for Required Navigational Performance. We have RNP approaches, and those are going to be RNAV type approaches. The difference between these RNAV type approaches and other RNAV type approaches is that RNP actually has the ability to monitor its navigational integrity. So it knows how good it is at any given time, and how close it is to being exactly where you want it. So this is basically like the GPS can almost line you up as if you're like a roller coaster going in for an approach. And it can be used in a lot of mountainous terrain and things like that, where originally we would have had to stay way over everything and come in real steep. Now we can kind of use this beam or track of RNP, RNAV approaches to be able to get in. So RNP, navigational performance necessary for operation within a defined airspace. So it has to meet certain minimum requirements of how accurate it is. Aircraft navigation system ability to monitor its navigation performance and to identify its operational requirements are met. So that's what I was saying there. It can monitor itself and monitor how precise it's being. Huge advantage is that it's a whole lot easier for ATC to be able to handle it, and so they don't have to intervene as much. They don't have to give you a whole lot of vectors. or route separation. So RMP capabilities depend on kind of what we've got as far as navigational infrastructure, but different planes are actually different. Like they have different RMP abilities. So some can actually be a lot more precise than others. Do you guys get what I was saying there about how it's almost like a roller coaster track going in, and we're using satellites to kind of make that roller coaster track, and it's telling the plane to go along that?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like a. Do you guys remember Star Fox? The that it was an old video game, and you had to go through the rings to fly to get like points and stuff.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah, I
that
remember
game.
that.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. In simplest terms, like think of those rings set up as an approach, and you've got to fly through each one. So it's pretty cool stuff. A lot of other places are using it more than we are. In fact, at SkyWest, we actually just rolled out an RMP program to get all our pilots certified with the approaches, and we can only do it on our Embraer 175s. We don't have the equipment on our CRJs. So this is kind of what I was talking about for certain airplanes can only get certain accuracies. So we also have to have certain accuracies to be able to do approaches as well as en route. So en route, they can put us on our little roller coaster track here. They can tell us this little airway in the sky, and we've got to be within 2 nautical miles. Once we get into the terminal area, within 1, and the final approach 0.3. Some of the planes can actually get down to less than 0.3. But I think 0.3 is that's the largest value that it has. I think some of them can get down to like 0.1. I'd have to double check, but yeah, some can get down to very precise. And that's the lateral performance required for the procedure. Okay, HUDs. These are some of the coolest things we have in aviation. It's called a heads-up display. And basically what it is it's just like this glass screen that goes in front of you. This looks, I have no idea what type of plane that is, but it just puts this glass screen in front of you. Sometimes it can be on like a helmet like that. Most of the time it's going to be something that either flips down. Some of them kind of look like a visor in your car that just kind of flip down, and it's just this piece of glass that flips down in front of your face. Others are permanently set up in front of the pilots. So for a lot of like fighter jets and stuff, they have those things permanently there and you're always looking through them. But this basically, you could fly blind with these things. They tell you where everything is. They tell you exactly how the plane's flying. You never have to look down. Everything, every piece of information is displayed in front of you. And I think it's this one. that'll kind of show you an approach with the HUD. We don't really need to hear it, so I'm just going to play it on here. Can you guys actually hear this one though?
No.
No?
I can't.
Okay, cool. So basically what this is, you know, we've got
It's
altitude.
muted, so that's probably why.
Well, I just was wondering if you could hear it before I muted it.
Oh.
Yeah. So they're coming in here. This is like a little plane. And then you can kind of start to see the runway forming right here. Got your altitudes and everything up here. And you can see this is just like a piece of glass that like flips down, just like a visor in the cockpit. And so he's just basically bringing it down, like just where it's telling him exactly what to put, where to put the plane. So if you think about this in like thick fog where you can't see anything, but you've still got this, and this still tells you where the runway is and where to line up with. And now it's kind of about to, see, it's still telling him to stay in between these. It's about telling him he can land. And now he's basically just kind of lining it up. At this point, it's giving him aural communications. So 300, this is telling him how far off the ground he is. And now it's showing him where the runway is. And then once you hit, you just hit the brakes. But it basically just makes it into a video game. Like I think they're just really cool. It makes landing a whole lot easier if you were in visibility restricted conditions. Okay, so it provides a projection of navigation and air data on the screen between pilot and the windshield. Any information on the aircraft flight computer can be displayed. And yeah, a separate panel or an eyepiece. Most of the ones you see are going to be a separate panel. The eyepiece looks kind of cool though. I've never actually seen one of those other than like pictures. I think the the really cool ones. If it'll ever pull them up. This works. So you can actually see that one's always up. Can you guys see that in there? That one's just always up. They never have to look down. Those were cool. But you would use those for those Cat 3 approaches. Did you guys have any questions about approaches, RMP, ILSs?
So, if airplanes are equipped with these HUDs and stuff, how come some places are still, I guess, illegal to land in? You know, with like conditions and stuff like that. Wouldn't
So
this kind of overwrite a lot of that, or?
no, it's just the HUD is very expensive, and most planes are not equipped with them.
Oh, okay.
I think I've only been. I mean, I've probably jump sat in. I don't know, maybe 75 times or so, maybe more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've only seen a HUD a dozen times.
Oh, okay.
Probably actually less, maybe more like half a dozen times, and they've all been on mainline flights, like 737s, 757s, A320s, stuff like that.
Okay.
We don't have any of them at SkyWest. I wish we did. It'd be sweet. I mean, it'd be very costly. I would,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah, this. I mean, they can land in like almost nothing. It could be thick fog, can't see anything, but you flip that thing down, and all of a sudden it shows you where everything is. Like even in the air, it can display your route. And so, like one time, I was sitting in the jump seat, and the pilot. It was the first time I'd ever seen, first time I'd ever seen one, I think. And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, you ever seen one of these?" And he just flips it down, and I was like, "No." And he goes, "Okay." He's like, "So look at that thunderstorm up ahead." And we're sitting on top of the clouds at like, I don't know, like 34,000 feet. And there's a big thunderstorm, like a big buildup of clouds up in front of us. And it looks like it might go up to, maybe like 38,000, 40,000. But it's kind of hard to tell because it's way off in the distance. And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, he's like, "That looks like it would be really close to our route. And it looks like we might be on top of it." And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "You can make an argument for both of those." And he's like, "So all I have to do is," he's like, "I just flip this thing down," and he's like, "I just turn it on," and all of a sudden it showed exactly where our route was predicted to go and how high up on the thunderstorm it was supposed to go. And so we end up requesting a change in route, like a minor deviation from ATC. And so as soon as we change it and set it, the route just like moves over and it shows us where we're now projected to go around this thunderstorm. It was unreal. I mean, it was
like updates?
yeah, it was just like it was a video game. Like we were sitting there playing a video game. It was pretty fascinating. It was unreal, just what it was able to do.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. I've never seen anybody land with one though, like that. And you can't see them. Like you've got to be like when he was showing me all that, I was like leaned way over, and it's basically set up to where only the person using it, like only the captain can see in it. Nobody else can see what's going on it. And so I was having to like lean like way over, and it was super uncomfortable and hard to see into, but it was really cool. And since then I've seen, I don't know, 3 or 4 other pilots use one just kind of in the air for the same thing. I've never actually been jump seating where we had a landing into really low visibility or anything, or heavy fog. But yeah, these are really cool. And yeah, if you had one, it would be a huge advantage on getting in to airports with bad weather. And you'd pretty much always be legal to go.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was asking, it's like, does those kind of trump the legal things, you know? Like if you're legal or not to go? If you have one of those, can you kind of overwrite a lot of that and just go in anyway because you can see what's you can see what's up, you
Yeah.
know?
So there's also another thing called auto land that you can use with that. And the auto land is basically like just in your FMS. We don't have any at SkyWest, but like a lot of bigger planes do. Some bigger planes do, and they can basically just set it up to, just like autopilot, to set it up to fly the plane itself. They can set this plane up to just land itself. And so with the use of like HUD and auto land is what you have to do these like Cat 3Cs, where they're basically just, the pilot is sitting there hands off, and then all of a sudden they feel the wheels hit and they hit the brakes. It's,
Dang,
yeah.
that'd be scary.
Yeah. I was in a plane one time, I was jump seating when we did an auto land, and the pilot kind of told me about it and like what it was used for, and this is a mainline flight, and it was, I mean, clear day. We were landing in Atlanta. You could see clear to Alabama, and he uses the auto land, and basically just the back wheels hit, and he's like, he was kind of teaching the FO how to do it, I think, or showing him how it was done, and I was fascinated. So I was like, this is sweet. But he was kind of showing him how it was done, and so he was kind of like talking his way through it, which was really cool for me. And he's like, and the front wheels hit and hit the brakes. So we basically, like, the back wheels hit, we waited for the front wheels to hit, and then as soon as they did, he like hit the brakes, and neither of them did like anything for the land.
That sounds expensive.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure it is. But it was really cool because you have to do them every now and then to stay up to date on them and to make sure that it still works for that plane. And so to test them, you want clear conditions like that. And so it was just kind of cool that I got to see one.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
Maybe one day, huh?
Yeah. All right. I could talk about a lot of jump seat stories, but we'll keep moving on. Okay. Our safety systems. Got our radar altimeter. This is going to be able to give us our height above terrain. It's going to be able to provide our absolute altitude on approach, info to the onboard systems, so the autopilot, the flight director. It's going to be able to tell the plane kind of what it's doing. So a lot of these terrain alerting and warning systems are not like new, but came about as a need. Clearly, there were some crashes before a lot of these happened. So the JipWiz is going to be our ground proximity warning. It's going to use that radio altimeter, and it's going to be able to give you call outs. There's also the TOS, the terrain awareness, that uses the GPS in a database of terrain, and yeah, gives you aural and visual warnings. So a lot of times when they're looking at terrain on the plane, it's actually not from like a radar finding the terrain, it's from a database, which is kind of, seems kind of weird, but that's how it's input into the plane. It's a traffic alerting system. This one actually doesn't go very far out. It only goes to 7 nautical miles, plus or minus the 3,500. It's a ground-based service, and it uses a Mode S transponder with an altitude encoder. So it's something that the plane is going down to the ground. It's transmitting the signal, telling where it is, and then that signal gets sent out to other planes. The TCAS. It's a Terminal Collision Avoidance System. Increases flight deck awareness, prevent mid-air collisions. This is also another one that kind of came out as something of need and not just a random thing that got put out. So it's an airborne system. Antenna receives Mode S transponder bearings. So basically, when you look at your TCAS, and a lot of times these are actually input on another system. So they would put input on the same system that they're looking at, weather and navigation and things like that. You can see all these other planes, and it shows you if they're climbing, if they're descending, and how far above or below you they are, and then where they are based upon your route. So
Now, when it says airborne system, how airborne is it? On like satellite? Is it on a planes buzzing around the airport?
basically it just means that it doesn't go to like a ground. So like the other one transmits to the ground and then transmits up. This one is basically the plane. Everything's like plane to plane. So it's a system within the aircraft. And this actually we can defer it without much limitation, but sometimes pilots don't like to go without it. But yeah, for greater than 30 passengers, we need this TCAS 2. So that's kind of what we're looking at here for this the CRJ 700 that we use for the class. Oh, that's it. There was going to be another thing I was going to show you. So this actually just kind of shows, this is a CRJ in O'Hare. And this kind of shows you more what a landing is like. And there's a couple things I'll see if I can point out. We'll scoot ahead because you can't see anything in the cockpit here. If it ever stops giving the spiraling circle of doom. Here we go. So what they were pointing out up there was the autopilot. It's basically just a button, and when you turn it on, the autopilot comes on. When you turn it off, it goes off. So these are the FMS down here. This is where all your nav database and everything is coming through. This up here, how the plane's flying. And then like I said over here, these are like rotating screens. So this, I don't know what it's on right now, but a lot of this is like, it'll go through your hydraulic systems. It'll let you know what those are doing, electrical systems, how much fuel is getting burned in each engine. all sorts of information on the engine and basically just how the plane is flying. This is also going to give you a lot too on what you're going to be landing with, fuel and stuff like that. This little wheel right here that I'm pointing at is the landing gear. So they just put the gear down. I'm going to unmute it and see if we can hear the outer markers. So there's the navigation screens coming through. So you can hear it giving out RL calls. Can you guys hear that?
No, we can't.
No. No.
No.
Nope.
Okay. Well, basically it tells you like when you're at the outer marker, it's like this just kind of like a weird sound that goes off, and as you're descending, it'll kind of tell you 100 feet, 50, 40, 30. It gives you calls as you're going down. But that's kind of what it looks like from the cockpit. All right, we've got 30 minutes left. Let me see. If you guys have any questions on any of that?
Easy way to remember all of these systems, or is it just going to take a lot of going over it again and again?
A lot of it is going to be just kind of going over it again and again. Let me pull it back up here.
Figured as much.
Yeah. The FMS is a big one. You got to know what the FMS does.
Yeah, if you could get us the list of like some of the top ones that we're going to need to know, and then
Yeah.
so those ones we can focus on, like how they work, what they do,
So the
how to
TCAS.
interact with them, and all that.
The TCAS is a big one. Your JIPWiz. the radio altimeter, just kind of know that that is what a lot of these are using. So the GipWiz is using that radio altimeter to be able to know how high it is. The HUD is not super important, I just get excited about it. Our CRJ 700 does not have one. But know what it does. RMP is a pretty good one to understand because, I mean, clearly we do fly a lot of RNAV GPS routes that use this and approaches once you get into a company. The ILS and the localizer. So there's 5 parts to an ILS. There's the glide slope, the localizer, the outer marker, the middle marker, and the approach light system. At SkyWest, I mean, our pilots pretty much always use these ILSs. Understand how it's used. We're flying along, and then we're going to pick up these signals that are going to tell us both vertical and lateral guidance. Know that the vertical guidance is off the glide slope. Lateral is off the localizer. It basically is sending out this path that we want to come down on. And it's telling us go left or go right or go up or go down. We're just trying to follow this down and land. You definitely don't want to know what these Cat 1, Cat 2, and Cat 3 are. Cat 3 is kind of hard to memorize, just 700, 150, 0. But this one is double Cat 2, half of Cat 1. That one's pretty easy. The FMS is our database with all of our information on it. WAS, look at these, be able to know the differences. We can get lateral and vertical guidance off of this. We can do GPS approaches with it. It's an upgraded version of GPS. RAIM is the measure of our integrity of the GPS. Okay, so what's our vertical guidance on an ILS?
The localizer.
Okay. Are you sure?
Glide slope.
Glide slope. So think about glide slope. You're gliding down
Localizer
on a
is kind of
slope.
the same thing.
That's what's going to give you your vertical. What about our lateral?
That one's the localizer.
Yeah, that one's our localizer. So that's our side to side. Localizer side to side, glide slope, vertical. You're sliding down on it.
I just got those backwards then.
So what is the difference between RMP and regular RNAV? What's the big difference? So the big deal with RNAV is that it has the ability to monitor and check its integrity. So if it comes in, it'll know that it's 2.1 off, and it knows that that's wrong. So it knows its own integrity, can monitor its own integrity.
And that was the RNP or the RNAV?
RMP. RMP is a type of RNAV. So RNAV is area navigation using a GPS. So then once we are looking at that, RMP is a type of RNAV. God, I had a whole lot more questions. I went blank. Is a lighting system a part of the ILS?
Yes. I believe it was called VASI.
So that's one type. So that was a visual approach slide indicator. That is going to be what we're looking at over here. That's for the visual part of the glide slope. The approach lighting system is going to be our ALSIF 1, our ALSIF 2, the Mauser. Yeah, those. Those are going to be the ones at the front of the runway saying they're kind of clearing you in. Let me see if I can find one real quick. Does approach have two Ps? Yeah, it does.
Yep.
Oh, this is a simulator. That's not what I want. We'll check this one out. I guess this is Chicago. Okay. We're starting to look at it right here. I'm hoping that I can pause it and we'll be able to tell which one it is. It's probably an ALSF2. Come on. Oh, close. Okay, so you can start to see it here, and do you guys see it? Did y'all see it flashing? No? Okay. Can you see it flashing now?
Yep.
Okay. Dang it.
Yes.
I tried to pause it. You can also see the VASI right there. That's what most of them look like, is it's four right next to each other. Or they'll call it a visual glide slope indicator. So if we take a look at this one, and then we go back to our lighting, looks like maybe that one. Yeah, I'd say so. It looks like an ALSF2. So these are what's flashing. Let's see, then you come down here. You have your runway center line lights. And then you land, and somewhere at the end is runway end identifier lights, but he'll probably turn off before then. But you can see these ones going down the center. Does that make more sense to you? Kind of how those are used?
Yeah.
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 The visual helps for sure.
Yeah. So that's kind of why we're required to do some, the jump seating we're doing. I actually got into a cockpit one time, and the guy asked he was like, "Oh, you're a dispatcher, huh?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "So," he's like, "are you doing your required jump seating?" And I was like, "No." I was like, "I actually don't even work for y'all." I was like, "I work for SkyWest." I think it was can't remember who I was flying on. But it was a mainline flight. And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I know you guys have to do required stuff." And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "But it actually does help you learn a lot." And he's like, "Well, that's what they say." And then I was like, "No." So I know you've probably been flying for a long time, but there's a lot of people that are not familiar with a lot of this aviation stuff, that it makes a whole lot more sense to us when we're see things like that and kind of know what's going on. And then also, like what thunderstorms look like en route, and there's a lot of cool stuff that you'll get to see once you start jump seating. And then it'll actually get kind of boring because you'll just use it to get around everywhere. But yeah, so that was what the VASI was. We got to see an ALSIF too. Outer marker and middle marker, just kind of know that those are part of the ILS. A lot of times the outer marker is your initial approach fix, but we'll go into that when we start doing more charts. I'll look and see what we're doing tomorrow. I'm going to be with you guys for the next 2 days too, so if you come up with any questions, let me know. I feel bad that I kind of rushed through that stuff there at the beginning. But yeah, okay. So does anybody have any more questions?
I'm good on this end.
All right. Well, I guess we can go ahead and end it here about 10 minutes early. Did anybody have any questions from the quiz or anything they wanted to talk about just in general for the class?
I do have a question. The quiz, are those used towards our certification final test, or do we retest on that? How does that work?
So we're kind of using those. They will be graded, but like we were talking about in previous classes, they're going to be graded, but they're not there to like try to fail you. More what we're using those for is we want to see where y'all are at and maybe where we're lacking, and if there's an area where nobody's doing well, maybe that's something we didn't teach good enough or didn't go over well enough or something like that. And so we're kind of just doing that to make sure we're keeping on track with what we want to do with the course, and as well as that you're staying on track with where the course is going. Those are also really good to use. The information that's on those is going to be great to use for studying for some of the final tests, because a lot of those questions are going to be what they're going to ask you in the oral. So I'm trying to think of like questions I got asked in the oral, but I got asked about, a lot of ILSs. I think he made me kind of go over the general understanding of how it was, like what it was. And I also had to go over a general understanding with him of how jet routes worked and VOR to VOR, like what the service volume was. I would almost guarantee you get asked what the service volume is on a low and a high VOR in probably your next quiz, a test, and the oral exam. That's a huge one.
Have we
So,
gone over that? Because it's not in my head.
yeah, that was the one where it was the birthday cake looking thing.
Oh, okay. Okay.
The VOR service
So
volumes.
flight surfaces, the ABCD.
Here we are. Remember VOR, VORTAC, VOR DME.
Yeah.
And then we went over right here. So a high VOR. Sorry, I was trying to move my screen around. A high VOR, we get the service volume of 130 nautical miles from 18,000 feet to 45. And then the low VOR, up to 18,000, we have a service volume of 40 nautical miles. That's going to be a big one.
Okay.
Terminal, I would know that one too, but that one may not be used quite as much. And DME and VORs and everything like that, this is just going to build on itself, because then we're gonna eventually talk about approach plates and how to determine minimums, landing minimums, things like that. And we'll talk about being able to find initial approach fixes, looking at these, like if DME is broken somewhere, where to look on the chart to make sure that we don't have to have DME, things like that. This will all build on itself, so we just want to make sure that you do have an understanding of it before we start moving on. But it's also going to help too when we start talking about the other stuff, because you'll be able to see what it's used for instead of just
Okay, so at that point it all comes together, because at this point I've got these different terms and it's not all coming together.
Yeah. We'll get there. Just DME is distance measuring equipment. Just we'll get to those other things, but and if we start going over that kind of stuff and it doesn't start clicking, just let us know.
All right.
Yeah. Did anybody else have any questions? All right. Well, cool. I will talk to everyone tomorrow.
Okay, talk to you tomorrow.
All righty.
Okay, good night. Thanks.
All right.